Here he comes to save the day! He's on his way. I swear, just hold tight. While we wait, let's learn about the creator of Terrytoons. Never heard about Terrytoons? Well, you're in for a treat. Paul Terry was born in 1887 in the city that never sleeps, San Francisco, California. Terry began his career as a news photographer, contributing to the San Francisco Bulletin and San Francisco Call-Examiner between 1904 and 1914. Remember the day when a city could have 2 newspapers? What? They still do? Long live print media, folks! In June 1909, Terry took over the newspaper comic Have You Seen Alonzo? From the original artist, Ralph Yardley, and worked on the feature until May 7, 1910. Alonzo the dog was the mascot of the Saturday edition children's pages in the San Francisco Call. The series was then continued by Paul's brother John Terry for a short while. 1913 saw Paul working as an artist for King Features Syndicate, which for sure sounds like an evil villain organization in the Marvel comics. In 1914, Terry became interested in animation after seeing Winsor McCay's Gertie the Dinosaur. More of that here, of course. While still working for the newspaper, he made his first film, Little Herman, which he completed and sold to the Thanhouser Film Company of the Big Easy's New Rochelle, New York in 1915.
Something that happened in this building back in 1915 probably explains why today's motion picture cartoons are usually humorous. At that time, Paul Terry was interested in seeing the reaction of children to his Little Herman cartoon. So he invited some children in from off the street to see the film. The responsive laughter of the children not only helped sell the film to the Tannhauser studio, but also convinced Paul Terry that the laughter of little children was contagious. And if he produced the type of cartoons which made children laugh, the rest of the world would laugh along with them.
Later that year, he completed his second film, Down on the Phony Farm. In 1916, he began working at the J.R. Bray Studios, directing and producing a series of 11 Farmer Alfalfa films. Before the end of the year, Terry left Bray, taking the rights to Farmer Alfalfa with him. Preferably in a tractor, like a farmer? That's a little something for the farm viewers. What's wrong with me? After a brief career at the Edison Company and Paramount, Terry went on to form his own production company, Paul Terry Productions, and produced 9 more animated films. Unfortunately, he closed his studio to join the Army and fought in something called World War I later that year. In 1920, Terry entered into a partnership with Amity J. Van Buren and started the Fable Studios. During this time, he began producing a series of new Farmer Alfalfa films and a new series, Aesop's Film Fables, which, despite the name, had little to do with actual Aesop's fables. Remarkably enough, these new episodes were churned out on a weekly basis, while other studios needed at least a month or two to complete a new cartoon. Yet Terry used more limited animation, much like TV cartoons would use nearly 3 decades later. Separate cells were used for various body parts, so they didn't need to be redrawn all the time. That sounds almost like a tale with a kind of lesson or moral, sort of like an Aesop fable? On September 1st, 1928, the Farmer Alfalfa cartoon Dinner Time became the second attempt to make an animated film with synchronized sound after Max Fleischer's My Old Kentucky Home from 1926. Far from perfect in its execution, the short failed to impress audiences. Walt Disney saw the picture and reviewed it as terrible. However, 2 months later, he came out with a sound cartoon of his own, Steamboat Willie, in 1928. Far superior on a technical and narrative level, In other words, Walt said, "Oh, hold my beer." The success of Walt Disney's Steamboat Willie motivated many animation studios to add synchronized soundtracks to their silent cartoons. Amity Van Buren asked Paul Terry to do the same, but he kept ignoring his request. Eventually, in 1929, Van Buren simply fired him. Terry and much of his staff started up the Terrytoons studio in suburban New Rochelle, New York. Van Buren retained Fable Studios and renamed it Van Buren Studios. And my PR folks, don't we just love a rebrand? That's why I'd like to petition once again to have this program renamed to The Fantastic Journey of the Handsome Narrator Through the Land of Discographies. Huh? No? Alright. Since he owned the rights to his Farmer Alfalfa character, the series continued at his studio for a while. But the farmer was never that popular, and Terrytoons tried finding a new star. All throughout the 1930s, the studio created many character-driven series that never caught on. Fanny Zilch, Putty the Pup, Kiko the Kangaroo, Oil Can Harry, Gandy Goose, Sourpuss, and Dinky Duck, which is crazy because those are also the names of all my favorite post-pop punk and ska bands. An attempt to adapt Ernie Bushmiller's Nancy and Sluggo into a series of theatrical animated shorts also failed. Paul Terry was quick to adopt techniques that simplified the animation process, but resisted improvements that complicated the production. He was one of the first to make use of cell animation, including animation of separate body parts. His studio was slow to switch to synchronized soundtracks and to color. While this may have sometimes prevented his films from achieving the technical excellence of Disney or Fleischer Studios, he did manage to keep his studio profitable, while others went out of business. Terry was once quoted as saying, "Disney is the Tiffany of animation. I'm the Woolworth." Dang. These cartoons were aimed directly at children, whom Paul firmly believed animation should be aimed at.
You made pictures for children. You always had in the back of your mind that you were trying to guide them to a certain extent and give them something to hang on to. And so because the way a twig bends, that's the way the bough grows. And if children are well grounded in fundamentals at the very beginning, you won't have very much to worry about.
It wasn't until The Mouse of Tomorrow that Terrytoons finally had a commercial hit. In this particular cartoon, a mouse version of Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster's Superman made his debut under the name Super Mouse. He too was an ultra-strong superhero who could fly.
He dines on super cheese. And behold, a super mouse.
The similarities were so close to plagiarism that in 1944 he was renamed Mighty Mouse to avoid copyright issues. Mighty Mouse's greatest foe, copyright infringement.
Mighty Mouse was built on a theory that man's extremity is God's opportunity. Now, when you reduce it to mice, you only had to put the mice in a tough position, and then they would say, "Isn't there anybody that can help me?" And sure enough, from the sky or somewhere would come, Mighty Mouse would come and save the day.
Mighty Mouse became very popular with children. Despite the fact that he usually only turns up in the last third of each cartoon, solves the problem, and then disappears again. Together with Max Fleischer's Betty Boop and Popeye and Disney's Donald Duck, he was one of the new theatrical cartoon characters to have his own theme song.
Here I am to save the day!
And one of the only songs to be performed by Andy Kaufman. As a theatrical series, Mighty Mouse kept running until deep in the 1950s. The second most popular and recognizable characters by Terrytoons were the identical magpies Heckle and Jekyll, who debuted in the Talking Magpies on January 4th, 1946. Much like Tex Avery's Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, Droopy, Screwy Squirrel, and Walter Lance's Woody Woodpecker, they were screwball tricksters. The two birds enjoyed fooling everybody and were always masters of the situation. The only way to distinguish them were their voices. Jekyll spoke with a British accent and Heckle in Brooklyn slang, just like my parents. Have your mom and dad ever called you a dub and a silly sod in the same conversation? In In 1955, Paul went into retirement, selling his company to CBS, which brought Mighty Mouse and Heckle and Jekyll to new television audiences. In retirement, Paul was able to pursue the artistic interests that he had put aside previously.
While I was in the animated cartoon business and a newspaper artist, I always had a longing to do sculpture, but somehow or other, in a busy world, you never had a chance. But now that I've retired and looking for something that's worthwhile and something that you can never reach the end of, I've taken to sculpture as one of the facets of my existence.
This bust is the latest of many sculptured forms which show the wide range of the artistic talents of Paul Terry. Life begins at 80 certainly applies to Mr. Terry. In addition to public speaking and sculpturing, he also paints.
Paul Terry passed away in 1971. As a businessman, his track record was impressive. He managed to keep his studio profitable by saving on production costs. For decades, new cartoons were released on an almost weekly basis. He wanted to make them like a milkman delivering a new bottle every day. Most of his cartoons were considered shoddy, low-budget work, since they had to be rushed out at such tight deadlines. In terms of content, they were extremely formulaic, down to the point of being monotone. And yet his studio still managed to be influential. Ralph Bakshi of Fritz the Cat fame started his career at Terrytoons and gave his crows Brooklyn accents because he found it so funny when Heckle and Jekyll used them. Osamu Tezuka's comic book character Astro Boy was originally called Mighty Atom, named after Mighty Mouse. John Kricfalusi, creator of Ren and Stimpy, has defended some Terrytoons cartoons, particularly those featuring work by animators Jim Tyre and Carlo Vinci. Kricfalusi also said that the dynamic between Ren and Stimpy was inspired by Gandy Goose and Sourpuss.
Where am I?
You're in a modern kitchen.
Where's the bathroom?
Other notable animators who worked for Terrytoons were Joe Barbera of the famous Hanna-Barbera duo, Alex Anderson, who worked with Jay Ward on Crusader Rabbit and Rocky and Bullwinkle, Frank Tashlin, Bill Teitla, and Earl Hurd. So really, one man's trash is another man's complete inspiration and livelihood. With so much influence and longevity, it's hard to say that Paul Terry and his Terrytoons were insignificant in animation history. They were there at the beginning, and they were there at the end. Although Paul wasn't interested in new technologies and innovations like Disney, he did focus on pumping out consistent products. And this is possibly the reason why Terrytoons lasted so long. And to those who say otherwise, thank you to these people for supporting us on Patreon and Ko-fi. Thank you for watching this episode of Discographies. Comment below with characters you would like to see us cover. Further reading and references are linked below. We hope to see you in another Discography.